We start this morning with massive wildfires across Texas. Firefighters are battling 4 active fires with disaster declarations in 60 counties. The biggest one is still 0% contained and recently doubled in size. Omar Villafranca is following this for us. Omar, good morning.
Good morning. I want you all to take a look at the flags that are blowing behind me. That wind has fueled wildfires that have burned hundreds of thousands of acres here in Texas. In fact, one of the country's main nuclear weapons facilities had to pause their operations because of that fire threat. And several structures, including homes, have already been destroyed in the Texas Panhandle. Just outside Amarillo in the Texas Panhandle, a wall of flames burns the ground and thick choking smoke fills the sky. Raging wildfires are fueled by winds whipping up more than 50 miles per hour. 80-degree temperatures and bone-dry air have made this part of Texas resemble a hellscape. At least 300,000 acres have been scorched across Hutchinson County, where the ferocious Smokehouse Creek fire has forced residents to flee.
We've had other fire threats and we've came out unscathed, and this one got us.
Kelsey Benuelos evacuated her home in Canadian with her 2 young children, her husband, and animals.
Oh my gosh.
Hours later, she learned that the place she called home for 7 years burned to the ground.
It was heartbreaking. I broke down, but I mean, we were safe. It's just stuff. It can be replaced, but it's still a gut punch. A lot of memories.
Get out.
This blaze not just a threat to homes. Crews were able to safely corral livestock on this ranch.
This is a monster fire.
As day turned to night,
There are so many fires.
the fires stretched into western Oklahoma, where more than 30,000 acres have burned so far.
We asked them to leave because it's a very dangerous situation.
Officials say at least one responder was injured while battling the flames, which have caused multiple highway closures. The state has received reports of at least 29 fires in 15 counties. The biggest fire we've been talking about, the Smokehouse Creek fire, is already the 5th largest fire in Texas history. But there is a little bit of good news. The temperatures are starting to drop, which should provide some relief to the fire crews out there. Nate?
Omar, thank you.
Now to the presidential race and the Michigan primary results that could tell us a lot about the upcoming general election. President Biden won yesterday's Democratic contest, but more than 100,000 Democrats voted uncommitted to protest Mr. Biden's support of Israel's war in Gaza. On the Republican side, former President Trump won easily. Nikki Haley got just under 27%. Ed O'Keefe has been talking to voters and joins us now from Detroit with the latest on that. Ed, good morning to you. The voters didn't have to wait long last night to get these results.
No, they didn't, Gayle. Good morning. Donald Trump has now defeated Nikki Haley 6 straight times, but she says she isn't going anywhere as the results continue to show a fractured Republican Party. And President Biden's big win here does come with a wake-up call amid a sizable protest vote over the war in Gaza.
And the middle class built the country.
It's a win for President Biden in Michigan's Democratic primary, but the results signal discontent among Democrats over the president's foreign policy. The ballot option, uncommitted, earned more than 100,000 votes.
I voted uncommitted because our president is not hearing our voices when we say that we want a ceasefire.
At a watch party in Dearborn last night, uncommitted voters celebrated the results. Michigan has one of the highest concentrations of Arab Americans in the country, and many use their vote to protest the president's support of the war in Gaza.
Because there's still a sense of betrayal amongst many residents and constituents across Dearborn and broadly speaking across Michigan.
Dearborn Mayor Abdullah Hammoud was among the Democrats who voted uncommitted.
So for you, voting uncommitted today doesn't necessarily mean voting against the president in November?
I think for me, voting uncommitted today is sending a message of we're trying to hold our elected official accountable.
In Michigan's Republican primary, former President Donald Trump thanked voters last night for his win after taking aim earlier in the day at his GOP opponent.
Nikki's not even a factor. You know, she's become a joke.
Despite another loss for former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley, she's remaining in the race, at least through next week's Super Tuesday contests, and said the Michigan results are a flashing warning sign for the former president after she received about a third of the vote.
And if states like Colorado and Michigan and Minnesota want to start winning again, You have to have somebody on the ticket that can win a general election.
So like we said, Super Tuesday in 6 days, 16 states and territories from coast to coast will be holding contests. And we'll wait and see whether any kind of a ceasefire in the Middle East changes the views of voters in this battleground state. But the results remind us again, Tony, we will be in this state early and often between now and November.
Yeah, and in November, those protest votes, they could hand the Palestinians back to Hamas and America back to Donald Trump. Ed O'Keefe for us. Ed, thank you very much. All right, we're going to turn now to Ukraine. Another major challenge in these United States is happening overseas. Russians invading armies claiming still more territory as Ukraine's army waits for more aid from America. Charlie Adagata visited 2 towns in eastern Ukraine that are under serious threat right now. They are close to the front lines and under constant shelling from Russian forces.
After the punishing battles that pummeled nearby Bakhmut and then Avdiivka, cities that stood as symbols of Ukrainian resistance and ultimately fell to Russian firepower, they've now turned their sights and guns on Chasiv Yar. The explosions were nonstop as we arrived to find a town ravaged by artillery fire and troops asking for help.
You can see the destruction everywhere, and the writing is literally on the wall. And the message couldn't be clearer. We are not asking too much. We just need artillery shells, and aviation will do the rest ourselves. And yes, it is in English because they know exactly where they want this message to land.
Ruben Sarukanian is a soldier with the 5th Assault Brigade. He said, "We're counting on our American partners to help us with weapons so that our guys do not have to sacrifice their lives." But Russia's lethal reach extends beyond the battlefield, as residents in the nearby village of Kostiantynivka learned.
As Russian troops advance, towns like this are in the firing line, and no targets are off limits. This historic train station is still smoldering from a missile strike a few nights ago.
When multiple missiles turned the train station into an inferno, destroying nearby homes with it. It was a direct hit, clearly aimed at crippling Ukraine's civilian infrastructure. This concentrated stretch of the front line has seen some of the worst attacks of the war. 2 years of blistering offensives and counteroffensives. But the Russians have the upper hand here now. More weapons, more manpower, and more willingness to expend both.
President Zelensky is in Albania to co-host a summit to drum up more regional support, but all eyes remain on that $60 billion Ukraine package stalled in Congress. Without American support, he says Ukraine will lose. Gayle?
Thank you, Charlie, and the world is watching. Thank you very much. We have some breaking news from the Vatican this morning, where Pope Francis made a brief trip to the hospital this morning after his regular weekly public audience. Now, the Pope, who is 87 years old, has been fighting a case of the flu. This morning, he declined to do a reading at that audience, telling people he did not feel well. A Vatican statement says Francis was checked out and sent home.
Now to a jury verdict that was years in the making in the murder of a hip-hop legend. Run DMC's Jam Master Jay was instrumental in bringing rap music to the mainstream. 2 of his former friends were convicted yesterday of killing him 22 years ago. Jessica Moore from CBS News New York covered the trial. Jessica, good morning.
Good morning, Nate. This murder stunned the world, partly because there were several witnesses, but none of them talked until recent years. That is what finally led to an indictment and now a conviction against 2 people in Jam Master Jay's close circle. Known as Run DMC's innovative DJ, Jam Master Jay, Jason Mizell's brazen 2002 murder inside his studio shocked fans and left investigators without answers for almost 2 decades until witnesses came forward. In a Brooklyn courtroom Tuesday, a federal jury convicted Carl Jordan Jr., Mizell's godson, and Ronald Washington, a childhood friend, for the icon's murder. Mizell's cousin, Carlos Thompson, applauded the verdict.
It's definitely long time coming. Justice delayed is not always justice denied.
During the 4-week trial, prosecutors alleged Washington and Jordan killed Mizell because they were angry about being cut out of a drug deal.
They offer coke and lots of dope, but we just
despite Run DMC's strong anti-drug message throughout lyrics.
Yo, what's up? We're Run DMC.
And public service announcements.
When it comes to drugs, only one word counts: no.
Trial testimony showed the DJ turned to trafficking cocaine to earn extra money as the group's popularity faded. Washington and Jordan face 20 years to life in prison. A third person, who prosecutors alleged helped the two get into Meisel's studio, will face trial in 2026. He has pleaded not guilty.
We got the two-thirds justice, if you will. We definitely want to see justice to everybody that was involved in this murder.
Washington and Jordan will be sentenced at a later date. They both face 20 years to life in federal prison.
This is still stunning to get this verdict after all this time, and didn't think it was a godson and a friend who still stayed in contact with the family. What was it like in the courtroom when the verdict was read?
Raw emotion is the best way that I can describe it. A fight actually nearly broke out.
Wow. In the courtroom?
In the courtroom. Washington started yelling at the jury, maintaining his innocence.
Wow.
Jordan looked at the gallery. His mother, who, by the way, had been there every day for an entire month, he said, "I love you." She then started screaming, quote, "You didn't look at the evidence. My son is innocent." Her family members got up to support her. The marshals descended within seconds. But it was very chaotic. The emotions were just palpable. And I actually spoke with Jordan's mother outside court. She believes her son is innocent in this case. Of course, it's tough. But Jam Master Jay's family said they were stoically satisfied.
Yeah.
Finally, a little bit of justice.
Yeah, many people believe justice was done in this case.
2 years later, Jessica, thank you very much.
We are learning more about the impact of the Alabama Supreme Court's decision on in vitro fertilization. 3 of the state's largest clinics have now paused IVF procedures while they analyze the decision, which gave frozen embryos the same rights as children. Janet Shamlian met a cancer survivor whose last hope of growing her family is IVF.
Oh! With 2 children, Birmingham nurse Sarah Houston and her husband wanted to add to their family, but a routine exam revealed the now 35-year-old had cervical cancer, requiring life-changing surgery.
I went into the OR to have a radical hysterectomy, so they removed my cervix, my uterus, lymph nodes, tissues, etc.
And you thought at that point, I'll never have another child?
I did.
But because her ovaries were healthy, the couple started in vitro fertilization and found a surrogate who was to be implanted with their embryo next month, until a sobering call last week from her doctor, saying the procedure was on hold.
I asked her at that point if it was an option to even look at moving her embryos out of state while they figured things out, and she told me that their guidance had been not to touch embryos at all.
How did that hit you?
Very hard.
3 of Alabama's 8 IVF clinics have stopped the procedure out of fear over liability, a real concern, says UC Davis law professor and reproductive historian Mary Ziegler.
The status is that, at least for the purposes of the state wrongful death law, these embryos are persons. The state Supreme Court hasn't said anything about criminal charges. But again, I think it's a fair reading of this ruling that if the justices view embryos in the way this ruling describes, that they would be interested in potentially weighing in on criminal liability down the road.
A bill introduced in Alabama's state Senate Tuesday would provide immunity to doctors performing the procedure.
Love you too.
How's it going?
Good.
But for now, patients like Houston are in limbo.
And I think the cancer diagnosis was hard because you were put in a lot of places where you're just waiting, for test results, or you're waiting for an answer on this or that. But you always knew when the end was going to come. You knew the next appointment. And I think that's probably the biggest difference as far as the pain you feel with a cancer diagnosis versus this is you don't know when it's going to end.
So this is worse.
Mm-hmm.
Alabama's Republican governor says she supports efforts to allow IVF here. Meanwhile, the Health and Human Services Secretary was in Alabama Tuesday talking to IVF patients and calling what happened here a direct result of the Supreme Court's overturning of Roe v. Wade.